Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour, and today is Friday, April 25th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also, from that same page, download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them, even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so by giving us a call through the Needle app. If you download the Needle app, it's NEDL AI Tuner for Live Radio. And if you download that, open it up, log in, answer a few questions, it gives you the option to type in comments or talk to us voice to voice. The other option is you can send me an email. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. And you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you through an email, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to do that because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that's just boatloads easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So please feel free to chime in. Um, it, it can be with a question or a comment about anything we've discussed in the past 14 plus years here in and through the radio show. There's been the interaction on the radio show has often been infused with input from people who participate in the support groups, and we had a support group last night. And the part of the group where we were listening to one of our favorite teachers had us listening to some vintage Guy Finley, where he was sharing some of his favorite stories. And you know, I'm amazed at how similar so many of his talks are, and yet how powerfully useful they can be, even though he's basically, much as we're doing here on the internet show, um, just sharing the same message in a variety of different ways. And the essential message is pretty much what we were reading from the Walk in the Physical book by Christian Sundberg. We were reading in the collection of essays that were titled, let me find my place here. And I have a note here about that. Challenge as a gift. And we had read the first one, two, three, four, five of those essays. And as you might imagine, with a topic like challenge as a gift, there are more than just 5 essays. So the next essay in that list is titled The Extremes of Duality as Expressions of Love. Many people that I work with do not experience their current life and the many things they love compared to the many, many, many things they dislike or hate in their life today. They don't have a way to wrap their minds around the fact that everything about this experience could be the result of a loving creator or a loving creative process, because many people have awakened to the fact that it doesn't make any sense to create an image of a God in our own image as a human being with superpowers. It just doesn't make sense that all the complexities of the universe at the quantum and the Newtonian level of physics and the vast expanses of space that continue to expand and dark matter, it doesn't make sense to think there's a human being with a brain like the human beings have that's created all of that and keeps it all functioning. And so here's a heading for this essay that says the extremes of duality as expressions of love. How could the devastation and destruction of war on the planet be an expression of love? How could anybody hurting another human being be a part of this thing if we say God is everything and God is love and everything is part of God? How could that be happening? So here's an essay on that topic. And Christian writes, the rigorous cruelties of the world. So here's an acknowledgement that there are rigorous cruelties in this world. And yet, he writes, they are not signs that reality is ultimately harsh and uncaring. Well, at a certain level of scale, that's the only conclusion most people would ever reach. That because there are rigorous cruelties, as he calls it, it must mean that the ultimate reality is harsh and uncaring. But he writes, rather, they are demonstrations of the incredible lengths to which love will go in the name of creation and experience. As we lose ourselves in the experience of duality, including its many seemingly darker aspects, it's easy to see the extremes of our experience in form and subsequently reach some form-based or nihilistic or existential conclusion about the nature of existence. In other words, from our very limited human perspective, we draw a bunch of conclusions and judgments. Just like a 3-year-old might think, my dad must hate me because he won't let me have 4 ice cream cones before lunch, right? My dad must hate me because he won't give me the big shiny new bike that my next door neighbor has. From the perspective of that 3-year-old, the only reasonable conclusion is my parents hate me. Well, we are just like an infant or a 3-year-old in the universe. We have such limited experience through the tiny, tiny bits of information that we pull in through our senses. And we have been lost in the experience of duality. We've been lost behind what they call the veil of amnesia or forgetfulness. He writes, we may correctly identify that form does not hold the answer, even as we forget the much, much deeper meaning of our own experience here. Form cannot hold the answer to our intense probing questions because form is such a tiny, tiny bit of everything that's going on. He writes, in fact, the extremes of this world have been created in a spirit of love, joy, and even play, not created in a spirit of heaviness, necessity, and misery. We've become so lost in the duality, however, that we experience much of the heaviness, the necessity, and the misery. And as we're lost in that, we forget ourselves. And when we do that, we suffer. Yet consistently, the enduring nature of love never tires of standing firm. It waits for us, even silently, around every corner and every experience. We may see terror, but even the opportunity to see terror is ultimately a profound gift of love. The ability to add to creation through the experience of deep contrast, this is also a gift of love. Now, the ego rejects this, just like a 3-year-old would reject that there could be any reason why his or her parent doesn't instantly give them whatever they ask for. However, our ego does not see the interconnectedness. Our ego does not see the purity of love that has given birth to the valuable experience of contrast that the ego operates within. Thus, when you decide to step past your ego to stop fighting, quote, what is, close quotes, when you decide to just be fully present with your experience, to release judgment, to be an allowance and surrender, you permit yourself to take a step back toward being personally aware of the more fundamental, loving nature of existence. Now, I'm frequently at a loss for words. I'm at a loss for words over and over again when I try to shine a light on this different level of scale, the perspective that can come from a different level of scale. And it doesn't mean that everything that's happening has been logically planned based on some kind of a rational logic that we might have been trained into and put together with our words, with our thought structures, with our egoic experiences. And yet, if we zoom out, if we recognize the way Stephen Davis talks about this in Butterflies Are Free to Fly, or the way Michael Singer talks about this in terms of, life itself is this energy flow. And if you step back and put yourself in the role of the observer, it's entirely possible to just be in awe of the flow of life day in and day out, moment to moment, because you're not attached to an outcome and you can see the entire thing unfolding as magnificent beyond words. One might say that if I'm sitting here thinking, if I've been a good person, I should be rewarded this way. And if what I do is of value to people, I should make this amount of money. And if I eat healthy food, I should never get sick. And if I create those kinds of labels and judgments, it's just as ridiculous as me watching a sunset and saying, this needs a little bit more of a green shade over here and a little deeper blue over there and a little brighter yellow or orange over here. It's just absurd. What if every time I judge anything that unfolds in my life as bad or wrong, it's just as absurd as critiquing a sunset or a sunrise? What if it's every bit as ridiculous as looking at a tree and saying that tree is ugly because the branches aren't symmetrical or the branches are too symmetrical? And I think in order for it to be beautiful, it should be X, Y, or Z different. What if every criticism I have about every judgment or criticism I have about any aspect of my life, the way it's unfolding, is as ridiculous as critiquing a sunrise or a sunset or a tree? The point is, the thing we're using to experience life at the intellectual cognitive level is so severely limited and has been trained, as the Way of Mastery says, they call it the intellect, which has been stuffed full of trivialities, like garbage in a garbage can. And there's just so much more going on. There are so many other ways to step back and have what they call a 30,000-foot perspective, that if we would step into them, if we would ask to be shown of them, we could be ushering ourselves into an experience of awe moment to moment in every moment of our lives. So that essay was titled The Extreme of Duality as Expressions of Love. The Extremes of Duality as Expressions of Love. The next essay is titled The Counter Pressure of Circumstance. And Christian writes, physical life is a constraint set that offers the spirit the valuable counter pressure that's necessary to participate in personal and in collective expansion. To the limited, correction, to the unlimited, powerful spirit, the opportunity to actually subject oneself to, quote, participation within a firm and rigorous context, close quotes. This is an extremely precious opportunity. Not to your ego. Your ego can't even imagine. Why would you put me in a situation where I don't like it, or I'm uncomfortable, or I've got a physical pain, or I've got an emotional ache? However, to the unlimited, powerful spirit, the opportunity to be placed within a firm and rigorous context so that one can experience these extremes is a precious opportunity. He goes on and writes, the circumstances of your life are the valuable counter pressure that your soul uses to become more, to have extenuating circumstances, to have new experiences. It uses circumstances to expand its awareness of what reality can be. It uses circumstances to identify what it wants and does not want. It uses circumstances to refine qualities of the self within a context. Your life is the context. You are the soul. You are the unlimited, powerful spirit. He goes on, a couple very simple metaphors may be helpful. Physical life might be crudely compared to getting on a roller coaster. Once you are strapped in, you're in for the ride and you can't get off. The ride may be terrifying while you are on it. However, it's exhilarating to experience and it creates a wonderful memory. Oftentimes, those who get off a roller coaster get back in line to get right back on. Others may decide they've had enough of roller coasters and not get back on. Another very crude analogy might be physical life is like lifting weights on a weight bench. The counter pressure of the weights pushing against you is uncomfortable. However, you utilize the counter pressure to grow stronger and become capable of more. In our case, it's not the physical muscle we're building, but spiritual muscle. We are growing our capacity to successfully engage realities in a creative, loving, and fearless manner. We are growing our capacity to successfully engage our experience of this present moment. The physical universe is a high intensity, full blown experience context, wherein the soul, which is your awareness, can temporarily adopt a role within form and use that role to better discover and refine itself. Your circumstances, then, are not curses, no matter how dire they may seem. Your circumstances remain precious opportunities. At times, those, quote, opportunities, close quotes, can seem overwhelming or perhaps even impossible to endure. There is no shame in becoming overpowered by circumstance. Now, my mind wants me to read that again and again and again. There is no shame in becoming overpowered by circumstance. And then my mind wants me to talk about how shame is just a, a thought pattern that I create because of how I'm choosing to interpret and respond to life. When I was 5 years old and I had a wet my pants accident in front of some fellow kindergarten kids, it was the end of the world as I knew it. I have another memory of being probably twice that old, 10 or 12 years old, and I was out with my mom running errands, and I was telling her, I really need to use the bathroom. And she said, you can hold it. And I said, I don't really think I can hold it. I really need to use the bathroom. It was just her and I in the car, and I was you know, physically healthy, but for whatever reason, my bladder was over full and nothing I did could stop it. And I had an accident. I wet my pants right there in the car at like 10 or 12 years old. I had an entirely different experience of that than the situation when I was 5. By the time I was 10 or 12 years old, I'd been directly telling my mother, we need to find a place for me to go to the bathroom. And she just kept insisting it wasn't that big a deal. Guess who was right? And that's the kind of perspective I had. I didn't load it with shame. I didn't hide it. I didn't hide that memory. I told people about it. I said, you wouldn't believe it. We're out. My mom wouldn't let me go to the bathroom. I ended up had to pee my pants. The shame is an emotional state we generate from the meaning we give to our current circumstances and the intellectual process we identify with. So you could generate shame in response to feeling overpowered by circumstance, but Christian's trying to tell you from another perspective, it's no big deal. It's part of what your soul comes here to do, to be in situations that feel like they're too much, just for the experience. Just like some people get on a roller coaster, just for the experience. And then they get whipped around and they feel scared and they feel out of control and then some people love it enough to go on the ride again and again and some people say, "Okay, I did that once. That's enough for me." So Christian goes on in this essay and says, "Your true power does not lie in your ability to mold your circumstances to how you would prefer them to be." Oh boy, this is right out of the Guy Finley talk we listened to on Tuesday. Your true power does not lie in your ability to control your life circumstances. He says, your true power lies in your ability to choose how you will meet those circumstances. I summarize it as how you will choose to interpret and respond to those circumstances. Christian writes, sometimes, physically speaking, you can do nothing at all, and yet you always have the power to meet your experience with courage, humility, acceptance, and love. That power is the true power. For you've come here to do just that, to actually and personally meet your physical context with a high quality of intent, choosing for love. And when you do that, you'll be using the counter pressure of the physical world as it was intended, and you will automatically begin to transcend the challenges of the physical experience. And that last bit there has me thinking about the book Tuesdays with Maury. And if I had the book here right now, I would open it to page 100 and just test my memory. I believe that around page 100, Maury is talking to Mitch Albom. Mitch Albom ended up writing the book. Mitch was a college student and Maury was his professor. Years later, Mitch was a sports writer and he was watching late night TV and saw Ted, whose last name will come to me, the newscaster, the late night newscaster, Ted Koppel, uh, interviewing Maury with the news that Maury had contracted ALS and he was going to die of it because, as far as they knew at that time, everybody that gets ALS dies. Well, Mitch reached out to Maury and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And Maury says, "Oh, not at all. Great to hear from you, Mitch. Hey, listen, why don't we get together and you'll help me write my last book?" And so Mitch started going over to Maury's house on Tuesday afternoons. And that's where the title of the book came from, Tuesdays with Maury. Through that process, ALS, the nerves and then the muscles quit working from the extremities inward. And eventually, there's great difficulty breathing. And so he would go into coughing fits. And at one point in time, the coughing fits would get so bad that Maury never knew if he was going to survive a coughing fit, if he was going to be able to reclaim his ability to catch a breath to save his life. And the people around him that were caring for him never knew. So he'd have these violent coughing fits. And at one point, Maury, in the middle of a coughing fit, he caught enough of a breath to say to Mitch, "Do you know what I'm doing now?" And Mitch thought, "You're dying." And Maury said, "No, I'm detaching." Now, they had a whole series of conversations up until that point. And Mitch said, "Wait a minute. I thought you told me that denial and suppression are not good. And now it sounds like detaching means you're denying this and suppressing it and not being with it." And Maury says, "I'm glad you were paying attention. There's a big difference between detaching and denying and suppressing." He said, "With denial and suppression, you refuse to feel it. You try to pretend it's not happening. With detachment, in order to be able to detach from something, you have to be with it fully. You have to let it wash over you, study it, feel it, understand it, be with it, just observing it. And then you can realize, oh, this is not all of who I am. I am aware of this, so I can't be just this. There's the part of me that's aware that I'm having great difficulty breathing. There's a part of me aware of the fear that this may be my last breath. There's a part of me that's aware of the room around me. And so none of that can be what I actually am. And this is what comes to mind here. So Mitch said, so what are you doing with that? And Maury said, "I'm simply feeling it fully, letting it wash over me, being aware of the fear that this might be my last breath, being aware of the tension in my chest and the pain, and then putting it aside and seeing what else is there." So if I'm able to put it aside, it can't be me. I have to be other than that which I am aware of. And so this last little bit that I read from the essay in A Walk in the Physical, titled "The Counter Pressure of Circumstance," this last paragraph says, "Your true power does not lie in your ability to mold your circumstances to how you would prefer them to be. Your true power lies in your ability to choose how you will meet your circumstances. Sometimes, physically speaking, you can do nothing at all, and yet you always have the power to meet your experience with courage, humility, acceptance, and love. Now that is true power. For you've come here to do just that. You've come here to actually and personally meet your physical context with a high quality of intent. I would add, choosing for love. And when you do that, you will be using the counter pressure of the physical world as it was intended. And you will automatically begin to transcend the challenges of the physical experience. I believe that in the book Tuesdays with Maury, that's exactly what Maury was doing. He was in it, he was feeling it fully, he was letting it wash over himself. He could feel the physical sensations, he could watch the fear that he was generating, and he was transcending it because he was understanding that's not his essence. So that was yet another essay in the list under the category heading of challenge as a gift. Challenge. Please remember, I welcome comments and questions, whether it's through the app as a typed in comment or a raised hand asking to speak voice to voice. I just checked the comments, and from 9 minutes ago, Don was asking, do I think that Bill Hicks was someone that Christian was a fan of because of the roller coaster analogy? Might very well be, but also because there's a very, to my mind, a very different aspect to that analogy. You know, in the Bill Hicks analogy, it's all just a ride. So I think the fundamental message that I take from the Bill Hicks little story about life is like a roller coaster would be completely compatible with what Christian Sundberg remembers from his pre-life experience and has been coached into by his guides, you might say. So the next essay in this list, under the category of challenge as a gift, is titled A Perspective on Suffering. And Christian writes, as a human, it can be difficult to understand suffering. But from the greater perspective of the Spirit, just watch these words. Watch what happens within you in these next words. From the greater perspective of Spirit, the potential to suffer and even actual suffering is greatly worth the trouble. However, he puts in parentheses, though it's never technically a requirement to suffer. So this is a refutation of what a lot of sometimes spiritual, but definitely religious thought patterns would give us that, you know, in order to, there's no gain without pain kind of thing, whether it's in the weightlifting or whether it's in your life struggles or it's whether it's within trying to prove yourself worthy to go to heaven in some kind of a religious context. There is a belief that many humans ascribe to that says suffering is necessary. In this set of teachings, Christian makes it very clear suffering is never necessary. He goes on and says, quote, what is, close quotes, all that is, can become more when it, parentheses, through you, close parentheses, when it can experience specific contrast, even when it can experience fully what it, quote, doesn't like, close quotes. Because when you experience what you don't like, it better defines the opposite. It better refines for you what you do like, what you do want to choose. He writes, creation utilizes definition, and free will requires context. that idea that free will requires context needs a little bit more. And if you haven't been with us reading all these different essays, that may not make sense. But he says your true essence is completely powerful and connected to everything. It's it's not tied down to your physical body. It's your higher soul, which is completely aware that its true nature is love and that it can't be hurt and that it can have anything it imagines, etc. So, in order for you to be able to choose one thing over another, when you're already everything and connected to everything, there's no possibility to exercise free will unless you create a context of this versus that. Sometimes people call it opposites, sometimes people call it contrast. So free will requires that you live in the dream of separation and you pretend that you're not already connected to everyone and everything, that there is actually a choice, right? You have to create a context in which it would be possible to shrink away from love. But we're talking about how love is all there is, and God is love, and God is everything, and you're a part of God. So, in order for you to have any ability to choose anything, there first has to be this dream of separation and the imagining that you're less than. So he goes on. The spirit, in a fundamentally joyful state, which is what the spirit always is, spirit lives in this blissful, joyful state. It decides in all its eternal and invincible power to facilitate new experiences for itself so that it can, quote, integrate, close quotes, them. In so doing, it becomes even more. It expands the frontier of all experience, and it just adds more to the joy of creation. Now, from our physical perspective and our egoic perspective, we can't even imagine that because the ego has very, very strict limits on what it wants and what it doesn't want and what it would allow if it had the power. So this is not from your physical intellectual perspective. This is from the spiritual perspective where they say everything that is experienced adds to the spirit's joy. He goes on to write, sometimes in that process, the soul must seemingly be tried to its very limits. Well, the entire idea that there are limits is fabricated, right? For the soul is already limitless and all powerful. So in this process, the soul seemingly gets tried to its very limits because there are no limits. And it's all creation. It's all from the initiation of a dream of separation. It's all a fantasy. He goes on and says, but so it is in a creation that ever grows and becomes more. For if it did not, it would be stagnant. It would not become more. What is what is, and it can't be anything else. So if it wishes to increase its scope, it actually needs to also be things and be some things that are challenging, painful, and constraining as well. Even when those challenges have been integrated, its what isness expands in due measure, and the native love and joy of creation grows with it. He writes, suffering is also meaningful in another way. It serves as the feedback and counter pressure that are sometimes necessary to, quote, drive, close quotes, the individual consciousness to personally grow its quality of intent toward love. Many are driven to a spiritual growth through suffering. And while that may be incomprehensible to the human ego, to the spirit that exists in eternity and to the one who sincerely wishes to grow in eternal love and fearlessness, such a price is actually accepted with gratitude. He writes, there will come a time someday when you will be able to look back at your own suffering and see its greater context. Until then, the invitation is to let yourself feel what you feel and let go of your judgments about it. Take heart, for your true nature always remains unharmed and invincible. No matter how much pain your local body may feel, or how dark your human life may seem, the source of all creation is always, always with you. Be bountifully hopeful in your true, invincible nature and in your inseverable unity with capital S Source. For there is always hope available through what you actually are beneath all of this convincing physical experience. Again, your true nature far exceeds anything your intellect, your human mind can even comprehend. It far exceeds anything we have any words for. So I'm going to take a breather here and ask if there are any questions or comments. Reading essays under the heading of Challenge as a Gift from the book A Walk in the Physical by Christian Sundberg. And we have people on the call, and we have plenty of time for a comment or a question. So please feel free to press the phone icon or type in a comment. And I will just take a moment to make a note about where we are in the progress. Reading through the list of essays under the category heading of Challenge as a Gift. I just flashed on a situation when I was in grade school, and I went to a friend's house and I was playing baseball. And they had a large yard, but then they had an empty lot that they owned. And they had a baseball diamond in that empty lot. And there was a fence at the end of the yard, and then there was a neighbor's yard, and there was a house that the neighbors had, and they had a large picture window. And somehow or another, defying all logic, I managed to hit a baseball so far and hard that it broke their picture window. And as a grade school student, this was the end of the world kind of thing. And I have vivid memories of my parents after my dad got home walking me down a block and a half from my house. They stood at the street and told me that I had to walk up to that house alone and knock on the door and tell those people that I'm the one that broke their window and that I would find a way to pay for it. And I have vivid memories of getting crying, shaking, and getting halfway up that sidewalk and turning back and looking at my parents who were trying to be supportive and smiling and saying, you can do this, go on, you need to do this. And I remember vividly, intensely saying in my mind, I hate you. Why are you making me do this? From my perspective, in that situation, nothing good could come of this. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. I had no idea what kind of monstrous anger might be awaiting me on the other side of the door. I could not know how that experience was necessary for me to grow and to grow in my capacity to understand that I had a lot more potential than I had lived up to. I had a lot more capability than I was aware of. This is essentially what these spiritual teachings are telling us. Every situation in our lives can be approached from that stepped back, observing position, and an understanding that no matter what happens, even if the physical body gets destroyed, our essence can use that as what I mean, use it as what? Use it as growth. Use it as an expansion of experience that it experiences joyfully, even though my intellect and my ego is seething with upset and anger and fear. But that the truth of my nature can't ever be chipped, dented, rusted, faded, or broken in any way. And so it's safe for me to choose an allowing, surrendering, joyful, even loving interpretation of whatever unfolds. So we've got about 8 minutes before the end of the hour. If I leave a couple minutes early, that means we've got about 5 or 6 minutes for a comment or a question. Please feel free to type something in the app or type tap the phone icon to speak to us. This is a Friday, so we'll be back again on Monday. Michael and Jeannie, as far as I know, will be having a live show in about 8 minutes. And as always, we're grateful that you're here and we always appreciate feedback. My email is tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. And Jeannie's email is jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. So please feel free to send us comments, questions, answers, suggestions. I reached, I received a suggestion. Somebody now is people have this job. They've created a job out of listening to podcasts and then making themselves a resource for getting other people booked onto podcasts. So there was somebody who's been listening to the Mind Shifters radio who decided that this book, A Walk in the Physical, and our discussion about it would be a great fit for Dr. Jordan Barber. So I have reached out to Dr. Jordan Barber to see if he would be willing to be interviewed on the On Your Mind podcast, which is hosted by Journey's Dream, which is a nonprofit that I donate my time to. And one of the things that nonprofit is trying to do is help rewrite the narrative on mental health in our culture to one in which optimal health and well-being are possible and expected, and to educate people about various options and opportunities that exist for helping people through a mental health challenge without just isolating them in a hospital or pouring medications down their system. And that body of work now has 193 or 194 interviews that you can find if you go to journeysdream.org/podcast, or you can search for onyourmindpodcast.org. And it's available as a podcast. It's available as a YouTube video where you can see the split screen of me and the people I'm interviewing. And it's also available as a transcript on the Journey Stream website that you can download or search for keywords. So, if you've read a book recently, if you have a favorite podcast, if you have a favorite spiritual teacher that you think is similar to or resonating with the same kind of message that we discuss here, I'd be happy to get an introduction from you to them, or even just a suggestion, even if it ends up being a cold call from me to them. I'm always looking for willing participants to share their gifts with our audience, whether it's the On Your Mind podcast or the Mind Shifters radio. So I see no comments on the app and no callers with a hand up. So I will just remind us all that the weekend's coming. Michael and Jeannie will start a new show hopefully in just a few minutes. And I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false.